Okay, so it should now be streaming on YouTube. Give it a few seconds if it's not, if you want to follow on there. Oh, hold on, we're not in live, are we, on the screen? So let's just pop that up as well, if you want to watch up there. Alright, so what's going to pop up on your screen very shortly, just a few different values in JavaScript. We'll just do a quick little after lunch, get the brains going again, see what data types they are. We can just shout them out, and then we'll explore some other data types and how we can combine them in JavaScript to create meaningful programs. What data types you know off the top of your head, guys? Shout them out. Booleans, yeah. Strings, yeah. Objects, absolutely. Yep. Arrays. Number.
No. Is that an object?
Null, yep.
Undefined?
Undefined as well, absolutely. There's actually a hell of a lot, right? But I think you've listed most of the common ones there. If you're interested in what is available to you in the core JavaScript language, one of the best ways I find is go to MDM. So some excellent documentation there. I can share the link after the workshop. And if you go to their JavaScript tutorial, down the left-hand side is something called built-in objects. And look, there's a lot there. Right, array buffer, atomics, big int, right, to deal with bigger numbers than was previously available. Boolean we mentioned, the date object, yeah, so we've got data type of a date. Function as well, we didn't mention function. There's a lot, okay, so JavaScript is an ever-growing language with more and more features being added year by year. Every June now, they add some extra features to the JavaScript language. It might not be an actual data type, but we did get some new data types such as a symbol in 2015. So ES6, if you've heard of that term, was a big update to the JavaScript language, and now we get smaller updates every June, adding new features, new methods, and so forth. Yeah, any questions already, Joshua? You're looking at me like you wanted to ask something? Nope.
So yeah, how many
What's that website you were just on?
So that's MDM, that's developer.mozilla.org, the Mozilla Developer Network, the same guys who make Firefox, yeah, and do a lot for the internet in general. I can share that link afterwards, but I don't want to open up Slack now because private messages and things, right? But yeah, but really useful link. Okay, so yeah, we've covered a few data types, but the key question is, how do we actually use these data types in JavaScript? So, yeah, let's just use the console for now. All right, quick thing if you want to follow along to any of the workshops. How would I get up this view? This is Chrome DevTools. Does everyone know how to use Chrome DevTools? Google Chrome, yeah, in general. So if you've got a new blank tab, by the way, Ecosia, yeah, if you ever want to use a different search engine that helps the planet, Ecosia is a good one to use. They plant trees for every every search you do. I said a Google search, obviously not a Google search, Ecosia search. Google DevTools, so inspect. So I can just right click anywhere in my page, click inspect. There's a shortcut as well, Control-Shift-I on Windows-based machines. Be very similar on Mac, right? When I click on that, I will get a view similar to this. You might have a split screen view initially, something like that, with DevTools on the left-hand side and your window on the right-hand side. You can make that full screen by clicking the three dots on the top right-hand side, and you've got some dock options here. The one that is overlapping makes it full screen. So obviously that's what I use for the presentations and the workshops, but if you want to just have it split screen to see what's going on at the same time, you're more than welcome to do that. One of the most useful features we use to check our JavaScript code is contained under the Sources tab. So we click on that, and you will probably have an expanded option over here on the left. Again, we can get extra options by clicking on the 3 dots. Sorry, not the 3 dots, the 2 arrows in this case. And Sources has the Page tab, the Snippets tab, File System Overrides, and Content Scripts. I think by default, we could probably get others. The one we're interested in is the Snippets. And that just lets us run JavaScript code in the browser, add breakpoints, get some output, test it, and those sorts of things. So you'll often see me and Ricardo, in fact Ricardo did it this morning I think as well, yeah, just to run a little bit of code to run a JavaScript snippet. Does anyone want to be there who doesn't know how to get there? Yep. So where did you get to? So right click on your page, open DevTools. So if you just right click on your page and click inspect, yeah, and that will open up DevTools in general. There'll be a lot of options up the top, such as elements, console, those sorts of things. So the one we're interested in is sources. If you click on that. But have you at least got an option called sources? Yeah. So if you click on that, and then hopefully somewhere on the left hand side even, you've got 2 arrows that you can drop down to select snippets. So if you click on that, that will take you into the snippet view. That's what we're using. And you probably just want to click new snippet so that you can code some JavaScript code right there in the browser. Yeah, if you want it full screen, the 3 dots on the upper right hand side, and click the overlapping window like that. Yeah? Okay, cool. You'll get used to it over the course of the bootcamp, yeah? Nice. So, we said there are a few data types. Alright, great. But how do we use them? How do we give them some meaning? How do we store them? All these sorts of things. So, firstly, if I wanted to create, let's start with a new array object. How would I create a new array? What syntax do I use?
Square brackets.
Square brackets, yeah. Let's say I just want to put some numbers in there for now. And that on its own would create a new array in JavaScript. So if I just ran that in the console, our output is just that array. Is there another way to create an array in JavaScript?
So constructor.
Yeah, so for certain data types, well for all data types in fact, there is something called the constructor as well. And that will be a function that creates an object. How do we use a constructor?
You would put like new and then you have to create class.
Nope, so the classes are already, we're just looking at inbuilt objects for now. So these classes have already been created for us, yeah? We looked at the built-in objects on MDM, and we saw that listed down the side, we've already got all these things. They're in the core JavaScript language for us. Booleans there, arrays there,
So
dates there.
use some methods.
So let's not get onto methods yet, but we can use the new keyword, alright? So just literally type in the word new. Wrong one, sorry. And then after that, we type the name of the object that we want to create. So if we want to create an array, new array. And then use the parentheses to actually run that constructor function. And inside, we could put the elements that we want to create. Okay, and that has also created an array of 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we can see on the output that's clearly got that square bracket syntax. It is an array. So those are fundamentally the 2 ways that we create our data types. Why did I show you that way, which looks a lot more complicated and long-winded than just putting some square brackets around it? Well, not all built-in data types have this shorthand, this literal format, right? We're used to seeing strings. We can do strings with some double quotes, with some single quotes, yeah, or with some backticks. Yeah, see the output is always with double quotes. It's treating them all as the same. So we've got these literals, these literal ways of creating data types in JavaScript by using this shorthand notation. We could have also done new string, right, to create an object representation of a string. Yeah, that's actually wrapped in a string, but we won't get into that. But essentially, that will be the same thing when using methods. But some data types do not have a literal. So in other words, we can't use any sort of weird symbol and then type what we want and then end it with a symbol to get the data type. Sometimes we have to use this new keyword. An example of that would be a set. That's another data type in JavaScript. And what that does is it creates another list, something that is similar to an array. So an array is just a list of values, right? But what a set does is it doesn't allow duplicates. Yeah? If that was an array, all of those values would be included. A set does not allow duplicates, so it essentially ignores the 4, the 2, the 3 and the 1 after the initial values have been put there. Yeah? So there's no shorthand to create a set. I can't do like a backtick or a hash symbol and that will create my set. There is no literal version of creating a set. You always have to use the new constructor. Yeah, so just be aware of those two methods of creating data types in JavaScript. Any questions before we move on?
So, go for it. I was just going to ask if the set, is that for you making all different types of data types, not just arrays?
So you can put any iterable in here. So what could I use? Will it let me do a string? Yeah, look at that. So we put a string into a set and it's divided it into each character. There are 2 L's in hello, but the set ignores the second L and just puts the distinct character in there. Yeah?
So it's been turned into an object?
It's been turned into a set, and a set is a type of object, if you like, a special type of object that we can use in JavaScript. Yeah. I know it's got the curly brackets around it, but I couldn't create a new set by just putting curly brackets. It's not an object, is it? It's a list. An object would have a key value pair. This doesn't have a key value pair.
So for what we can use this?
For what you can use it, getting rid of duplicate data is a great one, right? If you've got lots of duplicate data.
So it means if I got some a list of let's say some numbers.
Yeah.
So I can use this.
Absolutely, to get rid of all the duplicate numbers. Yeah.
I haven't seen this.
Imagine you've got 2 different parts of your program. One's getting information from one database, one's getting information from a different database, let's say. Maybe in those databases some of the data is repeated, but you don't want that in your final data set. So you could use this sort of method to just create one pooled data set.
So we don't have to use some filter.
No, you wouldn't have to use a filter method, it will do it for you. Yeah, so this is actually quite useful on some of the later questions on the platform as well. It's another method. Instead of using filter, you can use a set to solve some problems. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep into sets, but yeah, go on.
I was going to ask if it always outputs an array.
This isn't an array, it's a set, right? That's what I'm saying. They're different data types. An array is a list of data type built into JavaScript. A set is a totally different data type that not as many people have heard of. Yeah, I mentioned at the start, if we scroll down to S, we'll see that set is one of the inbuilt data types. Sorry, you can't see very well. Yeah, as well as a regular expression, as well as an object, as well as a number. There's lots of different data types built in. Primarily, you'll be working with strings, arrays, objects, numbers, obviously, right? Date, yeah, you probably work a bit with date. Yeah, a little bit in this course, not much, right? So they're the ones to concentrate on for now, but I just want to make you aware that the JavaScript language is a lot bigger than that, and that's how we create those data types.
How many data types do we have on Java?
I don't know, you can count that list if you want, but let's say 50 odd, 50, 60, yeah, at least, built-in ones, yeah? And of course you can create your own classes, you can create your own objects as well. So you've got the tools there to create anything you want, right? When you get more experienced. All right. We digressed a bit. What's sort of next on my list after data types? It's probably variables, right? Anyone who's following along with that little sheet of questions? Well, we can talk about variables anyway. Yep. So how would we create a Boolean? We can go through that if you want, but you probably know, right? You can literally just use the keyword true or false, right? And that will create a Boolean. That's one value. These are built-in words again. Or false creates the other one. Or you can of course do new Boolean, and in there we could put a value of 789, and that evaluates to true because it's truthy in JavaScript. If we put an empty string, it gives us false. Right, we'll come on to truthy and falsy values later on. But that Boolean constructor function there, invoke with the new keyword, is turning everything into either true or false. It's a binary option, right? Yes or no, true or false, 0, 1. Yep, so again, two ways to create one, but most of the time if we want an actual Boolean value, we're just specifically write true or false. Okay, yeah, we don't have to do every single question in that sheet, that's just a guide, but I think we've covered data types now. Let's move on to variables, unless there's any other questions on data types. Awesome. Right, so if I wanted to, well, okay, why would I use a variable? To store one of these data values, yeah. I probably don't want to write out this value every single time I want to use it in my program. I want to store it inside of an easy to remember name or a semantic name, and then use it again in my program whenever I want. I know these might sound like basic questions, but if you got asked a variation of this question at interview and you couldn't come up with a good answer, I definitely wouldn't hire you, yeah? So make sure you know the basics before running ahead. All right, how do I declare variables in JavaScript? Okay, I think I've heard them all. There was, in fact, let's do it in a snippet now. So you gave me 3 options. You gave me var, you gave me let, and you gave me, not even that, you gave me const. Okay, how do we use these keywords? Because at the moment we haven't created anything. What comes after the var, let, or const? The name of the variable? Yeah, so for now I'm just going to call it variable name 1, and then we can do the same, right? Yeah, alright, we'll do it for that. Just to be really explicit, just for the purpose of teaching. And then I put this equals. What does the equals do then in JavaScript? It's what? A binding, you say? Yeah, sort of. Yeah. In a sense, yeah. So we'd call it the... Yeah, we'd call it the assignment operator, yeah? So we've created a name, and we now need to give that variable a value. All right, the name is just a reference, if you like, and now we need to bind it to a value, as we were told there. All right, so... I don't know. Yeah, so we've got 3 different values assigned there. What's the difference between var, let, and const?
Const can't be reassigned.
Const can't be reassigned. Okay. I like that the way you said that. Yeah, that's very good. Hey, the scope can be different as well. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to make this one an array.
I think constant is usually written in uppercase.
you write const lowercase like that. You might have seen, yeah, in a different language, but no, as a keyword, it's written lowercase. Yeah, you could not do that. See? Doesn't recognise it. Oh, the actual variable name? Yeah, often you'll see that to bring attention to the fact that please don't change this in our code. Because you can still change it, you just can't reassign it, as Cameron said. So how do we reassign something? Let's say I want to change the value now of variable 2. How would I change that? Do what, sorry, Sanjay? Yeah, so just by putting the variable name, and then what? To put a different value in there? What value do you want to put in there? Sanjay, do you want a new value in there? Equals 4. Yeah, cool. Double it. Yeah, nice. So the equals operator can be used to assign something, but also to reassign. What's the difference between line 2 and line 5? Well, we only declare that variable once, right? So we've used this keyword to declare it. To reassign it, we definitely don't want to put let again, yeah? We'd probably get away with it, I think. I don't think it will complain, or would it complain? Ah, it would complain. Awesome. So you see that variable name 2 has already been declared, so it will not let us use the same name and redeclare a variable. So to reassign it, to change the value, make sure you don't use one of these keywords. And now, if we just said, what is the value of variable name 2, we should get an output of 4, right? Rather than 2. And we do, down here, yeah? Okay. Now, Cameron said we can't do that for const. So if I put variable name 3, let's just put it as an array of 4, it doesn't have to be an array. And then we try and print out what variable name 3 is, what do we think it's going to be, or what's going to happen? Not going to work. Why is it not going to work?
Because you can't change the value of the
Okay. So will we get some sort of error? Yeah? Okay, let's run it. Yeah, we do get an error. Assignment to constant variable. Yeah, so because we've declared this, we cannot do a reassignment of that variable any further on down in our code. Yeah? Can we change it in any way? What if I did something like try to add the number 4 onto the end of my existing variable?
Yes, we can.
So is it a constant, or does it just not allow reassignment? Is this reassigning? At the moment it's still reassigning, yeah, because we've got the variable name equals, but how about if we just added something on the end, like that? Is that allowed? Will it give us an error still?
I think it's allowed.
We'll create 2 separate ones.
You think it will create 2 separate arrays? Okay. Any other ideas? No? Alright, I'll run the code. So, by the way, if you haven't used DevTools, you've got this play symbol here, or Control Enter, to run your code that you write at any time, and that will give you your output down below in the console. So it seems to have worked. Yeah, it seems to have pushed the 4 onto the end of my array of numbers, and then just spat out my variable name 3 there. So that's different to trying to do variable name reassignment. If I tried that, it will not work. Yeah, you can see the difference. So const does not allow reassignment, which is exactly what Cameron said. Yeah, he didn't say it cannot be changed, that variable cannot be changed, but we have to change it using inbuilt methods, such as push. What do I mean by a method? Something that can be applied to a function? No, definitely not. It's a bit confusing.
like a built-in function almost.
Yeah, I think that's a nice definition, right? The word method and function, we often use them interchangeably. They essentially mean the same thing, but the distinction is, yeah, a method is a built-in function or it belongs to a class, yeah? Whereas a function can be one that we've written, yeah? Our own function as opposed to a built-in method or an array method. Yeah, that's the easiest way to distinguish it.
So if you did the same thing to a variable that is an instant, would it turn the array into 4 or would it add it to the end?
Good question. So, if I did variable 2 equals that array and push on a 4, and then what do you want? The value of variable 2 to be output? Alright. What do you think the value of variable 2 is going to be at the end, guys?
Well,
I'm
maybe
doing
some
it
object.
to the same variable.
To the,
Variable 2. So variable 2 equals variable 2 dot push.
I couldn't do that though. I couldn't call push on variable 2 because it's not an array. But if I make it an array. Yeah, sure. Let's do that then. Okay, so this time we've defined our variable with let. Does it allow us to reassign variable 2 to a different value?
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah. It's only const that has that limitation that we cannot reassign. So this code will work. Then there's going to be another issue. You'll probably be confused about what the value of variable 2 is. But let's run it and I'll explain. So we get a 4, which is maybe not what you're expecting. You were maybe expecting it to be...
If it would be 4 or if it would add it to the array, yeah. But 4 would be 4. Right?
Okay. Why is it 4? Can you explain?
Yeah, because it changes the array until just a 4.
No, it doesn't do that at all.
Reassign it.
We're reassigning it to the result of the push method. Now push returns whatever you've added, just as pop returns whatever you've deleted. So we've added 4, so therefore our value is 4. If you did this, right, add 4 to your array, then you're going to end up with the whole array. So subtle differences there. If that one was a bit beyond some of you, that's cool, but it's just an extra question, I guess, for people who have seen this before. Yeah, so the key things are, there's 3 ways to declare variables in modern JavaScript, using the var keyword, the let keyword, or the const keyword. Please, just in general, don't use var, right? There's not really a good reason to use var in modern JavaScript. It was all that used to exist, and then we got 2 better methods to use that cut down on errors when writing our JavaScript language, and they're just a bit clearer to use. We can explain more of the differences later on, but for now, just know that try and avoid using var at all times. Use let and const instead, please. Alright. Any questions on variables, storing variables? No, so we've got single reusable values there, but what if we want to reuse more than one value? What other structure can we use in JavaScript programs?
Object.
Could use an object, yeah, okay, so that would be numerous values, but how about multiple statements? Object's still a value at the end of the day. It's still one single value, it just contains multiple values inside of it. How about if I had about 20 different statements that I wanted to keep in one block of code? What structure could I use to contain all of that, to encapsulate that?
Array of objects?
No, I'm not thinking of that even. What is written on my screen right in the middle?
Function.
Function, yeah? So if we want to reuse more than one bit of code, often we'll stick it into a function. Yeah, so within that function we might create variables and use methods, but to encapsulate related blocks of, or related statements, then we will stick them in a function. How do I create a function in JavaScript?
You have to type the word keyword functions and the name.
One way to do it is to type the word function. I then give my function a name.
Or,
Oops, not equals. Then what?
or short index.
Open brackets.
Let's finish the first way first, and then we'll talk about the second way. So yeah, open brackets, curly braces, and then all my code goes in here, right?
And,
Okay. So let's be really basic and let's create a function that adds 1 to a number. Yeah? So add 1 to number. Something like that. Is that a valid name? Can I have numbers in my function name? I can. It probably tells you, but could I have a number at the start? No. Yeah, so there are some naming restrictions on our functions. It cannot start with numbers. Underscore's okay, but that has a special meaning. But just be aware that there are some restrictions. So in general, we just use alphanumeric characters, and they're written in what case? Camel case for JavaScript, yeah? If we're using Python, we might use, what case is that called? Yeah, Python, snake, get it? Yeah, a snake case, absolutely. Yeah. Why is it a snake? Because it's got that sort of joining bit down the bottom, as in like numbers are slithering backwards and forwards, yeah? You've got ones in the middle, like that. Kebab case, like a skewer, yeah? Or hyphen case if you prefer. But you get the idea, right? But in JavaScript, camel case. So the first word is lowercase, or the first letter of the first word is lowercase. Every subsequent word is capitalized. Yeah, the first letter is capitalized. Cool. Okay. And how would I get some inputs into that function?
need to put it in the brackets. The two factors, the number that you want to add 1 to. So you need to put like 10 or something in the brackets so you can invoke it later. For the number you want actually.
Okay, yeah, for now I'm just going to put that, and we'll change it around in a second. But putting a name in there will create a variable of our input with the name input name that we can use later on in our function, you know, something like that. Let me just tidy up my screen slightly. Let's get rid of our variables for now. Okay. How do I set a value to this input name? Say again? Have to invoke the function? Yep. So this is just a function declaration, as we spoke about a little bit yesterday. It just stores this bit of code in memory, ready for when we want to invoke it, when we want to actually run that bit of code. How would I invoke a function?
Name.
Yep, so it's name, which in this case is add 1 to number, and then the parentheses, right? So how do I now get a value into input name?
You have to
You just write a value into the
just pass the parameter.
parentheses.
Yep, so down here we can pass an argument, yeah? We can put an argument when we call our function. And let's say we just want the number 7, yeah? So we call this function, we pass in an input of 7. That input goes up here, gets stored in a variable called input name. So a better name would be number at the moment. We then take that number and add 1 to it. Cool. Is that going to output anything
No.
to my console?
After return.
It's going to output something. Yeah, it's going to output undefined. If I run that now, I get undefined. Why? Well, because my function did not return any value, which is why we need that return keyword in there. So now it should output what? 8. And it does. Exactly. So I sent a little picture as well, I think, when just before lunch, in terms of what's the difference between a parameter and an argument. Did anyone look at it? I think at least one of you did. Do you want to try and summarize what's the difference for me?
So the parameter is the number that you give to the function when you create the function. So that's going to be the input.
Okay.
And then the argument is the input you put into the function when you call it.
Yeah, essentially. So down here, when you invoke the function, we tend to refer to that as the argument. Yeah. So this has one argument with a value of 7. However, we create a parameter called number. Yeah. So that's the actual variable that we can reuse inside of our function. So if you like, the parameters are just variables that are created from the arguments that we pass in to the function. Yeah. Most people use them interchangeably, but if you ever get a little tricky question like that, then yeah, the arguments are inputted down here when we invoke the function, and the parameters are created by the function itself and stored as a variable. Yeah, so that would be your parameter up there. So we could not give our input in line like that, but we could have created our argument value there and pass it in like that as a variable. That will just take the value 7 and pass it in as before. Then our parameter name, we can add 1 to it, and that code will still work. Yeah. This argument value and this parameter name don't have to be called the same thing. Yeah, a lot of people think they do. Well, it doesn't, does it? Obviously it doesn't, because I've just done it and it works. Yeah. So the parameter name only exists inside the function. Yeah, I couldn't down here somewhere do a console.log parameter name. Yeah, parameter name is not defined because this is outside of the function, so the parameter doesn't exist. Yeah, parameters belong to functions. The argument value we've set outside.
So if you put console log blah blah blah, just underneath in terms of
Sorry, wrong place. Right, it has to be above. Say what, Joshua? Okay.
So why would you use like the different names?
Why?
Yes.
I use them quite a lot. I'm trying to think of a good use case. I'll come back to that question when we look at some examples, right? And then I'll hopefully be able to think of an obvious use. But yeah, you can either call them the same name or you can call them different names, right? Maybe this is a specific number, like, I don't know, player 1 score, or something like that. And then you've also got player 2 score. So it doesn't make sense for me to write either player 1 score or player 2 score here. Alright, because I want to use the same function every time one of them wins a game. So obviously we could write some sort of if player 1 wins, yeah, then I call add 1 to number with player 1 score. Sorry, that should be lowercase, right? I don't know why it's uppercase. Yeah, so player 1 won a game. Let's add 1 to player's 1 score. So here I can just call it score and return score plus 1. Yep, so we still get 8. If we change that, obviously manually now, but if we change that to 8, we should get 9. Right. Still works. So this applies to all scores, but our variables might be specific scores. That's one use case, as whereas you use different names, right? Questions on functions, using functions? No? No questions on functions? Yeah. Yeah, good question, definitely. So at the moment we've just got one parameter here, right? Score. If we wanted a second parameter, name, how do we input that? Well, we just put a comma, a space, and then another parameter name. Yeah, and then down here we can pass in the inputs. Will that still work, even though I'm only passing in one input, but my function is expecting 2 inputs?
Yes. So the output would be defined for the single variable.
I'm still going to return 9. Yeah? So the value of name is going to be undefined, but it doesn't break my code. So in a lot of languages you cannot do that. If you declare a function that requires 2 arguments, or you have named 2 parameters, so you're expecting 2 arguments to be inputted, then you need to input both of those arguments. In JavaScript you can get away with it, right? It will just initialize that variable with no value assigned to it. It will essentially do that, right? Name with just a semicolon after it. Yeah, let name. It will define a variable and not give it any value. Cool. How about if I wanted to have a default parameter? How would you do that in JavaScript? Let's say we want to just input the name in here. You're talkative, Zara, so I hope you don't mind me using your name. So we can just have Zara's score be outputted here as a string. So we can say name score is, it's not going to work yet, but we can solve it together. And then we want it to be score. So there's a couple of questions. First, how are we going to turn that string into a combination of strings and variables? What can we use in JavaScript to do that? Could use a plus symbol. Is there a more modern way? Template literals. Someone was listening earlier. Yeah, so we can use backticks, and that will turn it into a template literal. How do we then say that certain things are a variable inside of that template literal? we use the $sign, absolutely. Where's it gone on my keyboard? No, that's a pound. And wrap it in curly braces. And score is also a variable, right? Yeah, so we want to output Zara's score is the actual value of the score. However, we've only inputted the name. Just to avoid confusion, that's going to be the first input, and then the second input is the score. How do I say that by default Zara's score is 5 if we don't pass in a score?
Can you make score equal to 5?
Yeah, it's literally as simple as that, right? Score equals 5. Now it should return Zara's score is 5. And it does. If we didn't have that default value there, it would of course say Zara's score is undefined. Make sense? Yeah, so we can give the parameter a default value. Can we declare a constant inside the function? Absolutely, that's another way to do it, right? You could say const score equals 5. Let's do it a different value, right? 7, just to prove that we can get different values. Const score equals 5. Why is it not liking that? Score's already been declared. Oh yeah. So because obviously we've declared a variable there called score, so I can't use const there. I'd have to just reassign the variable that's already been created. But you can absolutely use const. What should we say? Other player score, something like that. And then you could say other score is other player score, something like that. Of course, we can't have two return statements inside of a function. What will this return? As it is the first one, right? It's only going to return line 4. Zara's score is undefined. So if we wanted the other player's score, oops, what mistake did I make? Others is not, oh yeah. So I actually want it to physically say others, right, in this case. It's not a variable, I actually want the string. Alright, anything I have missed on those list of questions, or anything else you want to ask?
You can define it outside the function as well, right?
Absolutely, you can define it wherever you want, yeah. Yeah. So you can define variables wherever you want. It's not limited to inside functions. It's not limited to global scope. It can be anywhere you want. There is another way of writing functions, though. All right. Function expression. Does anyone know what a function expression looks like? What? Tell me.
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't know? Sorry, I thought you said yes.
I think I know
Mm-hmm.
how to do it, but replace and arrow side. Yes.
No, so I don't want to make an arrow function yet, but I just want to make a function expression, and then I'll talk about arrow functions as well. So the value of a variable could also be a function. So we could do something like this. Function name equals, yeah, we'll leave it like that. Or is that going to be confusing? So let's say add 1 to number equals a function. And then we can put our same code inside. Get rid of that. Okay, so what did we have up here? We had a name and we had a score. Let's default it to 5. Get rid of the const for now. Right. So it looks a bit different. Yeah, we haven't got function at the start. We've assigned the function into a variable, but we haven't put a name after the function, right? Previously we had the function's name in there. Now we put the function's name here, outside, and use the variable declaration to store that function in memory. We still invoke it in the same way, just reference the name, brackets, and then our inputs, our argument values, and it still works. Now, why is that a useful way to write functions? Well, it allows us to use the more modern arrow function syntax, which we couldn't do using the other format, but we can do it this way. So how do I write an arrow function?
Would you delete the return?
We may need a return, we may not, but okay, let's try and make one without a return.
And then delete the curly braces.
You want to delete the curly braces as well. Okay.
There's a
Arrow here.
No. Inside the brackets.
Inside the brackets. In here.
Just right after name.
Here.
Yeah,
No.
After the brackets.
After the brackets, right? It was there.
yeah.
And remove the function keyword. So you either use the keyword function to create a function, or you do an arrow function, which at its most basic looks like some parentheses, an arrow, and then what you want the function to return. Yeah, so that there is an arrow function. It doesn't have any parameters at the moment. The parameters was go inside here. So we want to give it name and score equals 5 as before. And again, that should still work. It does. So our score is 5.
So you don't need the return in an arrow function?
So you don't need a return in an arrow function if it's
There's only one.
if there's only one statement. There's only one statement, right? I could not do, what did we say before? We did something like const other equals 7, semicolon, and then that. It will complain now because there's two statements. We've made a variable declaration and then we've created a string. That does not work. It just says unexpected. Oh, unexpected token. Yeah, so you couldn't return a const. That's what it's complaining about there. But essentially, yeah, it's one statement you can only have. Or if you do want more than one statement, you do have to bring back the curly braces. And then we could do our const other equals 7, and then just return the relevant bit that we want the function to output. Yeah, that is also valid. So if it's all on one line, then no, you do not need the return there. It's implicit. The interpreter works it out for us and says no, we do not need that. If you've got more complicated functions that you can't write on one line, or it's not just returning one div, so you often see it in React, and people will put, come on mouse, people will group various things together by using normal brackets like that, and they create essentially just one thing is being returned, right? One div. or a div. So essentially they're just returning one div. And then inside of that, they can of course have lots of other elements down here, and that's all valid. It's not valid here because I'm trying to do JavaScript, right, rather than JSX in my console. But you would see something like that in React. You've grouped all the elements together into one container, and you can return them from an arrow function like that without a return statement. And there's no equivalent to just write an arrow function on its own. What did we have before? A string, yeah. There's no equivalent to write an arrow function like that just on its own. You could do it, but there's no way to reference it. We can't give it a name here. Yeah, we cannot put a name or something like that there. It just will not like it at all. So if you do create an arrow function, you're going to need to give it a name and assign it to a variable like that.
Why you use const, not let?
Because there's a design pattern in a lot of software that you try and make pure functions. So given the same inputs, a function should always produce the same outputs. So in other words, that function is unchanging, right? It should not change. It should not be manipulated in any way so that I can successfully give it a const. I don't want to reassign that function. That function is a vital part of my program. I don't want people changing what that function does. So I want to say this is a constant function. Don't change it. Just use it as it is with your own inputs. Yeah. You could use let. That's valid, but I don't want people changing my function and reassigning it. So I'd use const. Yeah. Anything else, guys? Because that's quite a long workshop again. Did that answer most of the basic questions on data types and functions? And do you want to do a quick example on the platform? Run through a question there.
So I know that function can be used as arguments. Is it something we...
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll do a workshop on higher order functions, which is where we can pass functions to other functions and so forth, yeah? Which is what you're hinting at there. But I don't think I will do that for today. All right. No? Want a question on the platform to put it into practice? Yeah? So we'll just do beginner. Let's do some if-else statements, right? A bit of logic. And that doesn't give us much code, but this one does. Right then, so we've got two functions there. Make even and is even. What are our arguments and what are our parameters? What are the values of our arguments?
Arguments are 2.
Yep.
2, 3, and 1.
Okay, yeah. So we've got our inputs, our arguments are 2, 3, and 1 for each invocation of the function. So we're not invoking is even directly, are we? There's no reference over here to is even. So just take note of that. What's the name of my parameter? Number. In both cases, right? This number, this number. Be aware that they could be different values, those numbers. In this case they're not, but they could be different values. So this number is created inside of this function, and this number is created inside of the is-even function. What's is-even doing?
It's verifying whether a number is even or not.
Yep.
It's checking if there's a remainder when you divide it by 2.
Mm-hmm. So what's this symbol then? The division symbol. Modulus, yep. So there's lots of different operators in JavaScript. I think you could just, again, search W3 schools JavaScript operators, And one of the mathematical operators is a modulus, a percentage symbol. So what that does is it divides this number by 2, and the result of that operation there is the remainder. So if I had a number 7, if my number was equal to 7, what would be the result of that little bit of code there? 1, yeah, because the remainder of 7 divided by 2 is 1. If my number was 5, still 1. If my number was 10, 0. Exactly. Yeah? Understood? Cool. So that's an easy way to check whether a number is even or not. There is no is-even function built into JavaScript, the same way there's a filter or a find, so you have to write that little bit of functionality yourself. Yeah? But fairly simple. Cool. So, line 2 then. What's it doing?
It's passing the number to the function. Then
So this is another function invocation, right? Is even, and passing the value of our number parameter here into the is even function. So this code would execute line 1, it would get to line 2, and it would call the is even function. So it would jump its execution down to here and run this line of code next. Then the result of that function comes back up here, and depending on whether that is true or false, we're either going to run line 3 or we're going to run line 5, dependent on the result of that. So what line gets run if my number is 7? Yeah, number 3 will get ignored, right?
no, number 3 would be executed.
Hmm? So let's go through the flow, right? My input is, what ones have we got?
You said 7.
Yeah, if my input is 7, is even 7 comes down here. 7 modulus 2 triple equals 0. So in other words, 7 modulus 2, is it exactly the same as 0? True or false? False. So this line here becomes if, and we get false. Yeah? So will it run that one or that one? Yeah? Because this is false, the if statement gets skipped. So line 3 does not run, and line 5 runs. So your job in the question was to make sure that the odd numbers were multiplied by 2, but the code wasn't working as intended. Yeah, it was actually doubling the even ones and leaving the odd ones alone.
Okay.
Yeah, so this code is not doing what we want it to do, which is maybe where you were getting a bit confused, Joshua. Yeah? But if that's false, then it will ignore the inner code. It will only run line number 5.
So we need to negate.
Need to negate, yeah. How do we negate in JavaScript?
Maybe you can
Exclamation mark.
Exclamation mark symbol, yeah.
Bang operator.
Then what?
Bang operator.
A what?
It's called sometimes bang operator.
Oh, the bang, yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying, yeah. Yeah, let's just stick to the not operator for now, yeah. So that is an exclamation mark. So we could say if it's not even, return 2 times the number, otherwise just return the number as it is. And then that works, right? As simple as that question. Just putting an exclamation mark in there. But it's important to understand what the code's doing and what order it is running in as well. Questions? Had enough? Want to move on to other things? Okay, alright, well, we'll leave it there, yeah? If there's no questions, we'll leave it there. But just put into practice what we've learned. Try and answer those little guidance questions that I've asked you in that text file. If you can't answer them, get back to me or send me a message on Slack, and I'll try and make it a bit clearer. And then try and put into practice on the beginner JavaScript questions. Simple as that. You don't have to. It's just guidance, right? Yeah. If no one's looking at them, no one's using them, I won't bother writing them out. But I just thought it might be helpful for you guys.